Welcome back to Switch to Linux with another outdoor philosophy. So we are continuing our discussion of the book First Things First by Stephen Covey, Roger Merrill, and Rebecca Merrill. And what we're going to do today is look at Chapter 8, and this is the perspective of the week. And this is not W-E-A-K, but W-E-E-K. I think I spelled the other week wrong too. Oh well, that's all right. You'll forgive me, I think. I hope, maybe. Please? Regardless, we're talking about the perspective of the week, which is, the 7-day period, of course. And the purpose of this discussion, the perspective of the week, is to balance the two paradigms. Again, this entire book is about looking at the paradigms that we have for time management and questioning, are these appropriate ways to do things? And there's two basic pitfalls we tend to fall into. One of those is this close-up view where we're looking day by day by day, but when we do that, we fail to see the big picture coming down the pipeline. And then the next failure is that seeing that whole big picture view, because then it loses perspective of the day-to-day activities. And so what they suggest is a weekly perspective, which means that we're taking time once a week. And I used to be a lot better than this. I'm not quite as good at it anymore, but what I used to be able to do is take on Sunday night I used to do it. I'd take the calendar off the wall on a dry erase calendar, and I'd work up weekly goals for various things. And I got to get back to that. It's one of those things. This is why I read these books every few years, is because it brings you back into that perspective of the things you've fallen out of, because you find yourself quite productive when you know that there's a bunch of things you need to do. But that weekly perspective is very important because it combines taking time to sharpen your saw and to reevaluate your goals and to examine who it is you want to be, what are the roles, what are the goals you have, and then to examine all those, gather a big picture, and then look at your upcoming week and decide which things you need to focus on where. And so what they're going to talk about here is how to schedule different things throughout the week using what they'll call time zones. And we'll get into that in a bit here. But what we're looking at is we do a balanced renewal. The weekly perspective gives us the renewal to say, we know the various things we need to accomplish. When is the best time to accomplish them in any given week? That is kind of what is at heart here. And so we look at that weekly renewal where we are taking that time to specifically look at our goals, specifically look at our missions, specifically look at our relationships, looking at all of those things in our life and asking ourselves that critical question: have we established balance this week? And if you have not established balance this week, then you need to go ahead and reevaluate that. Now, you also have a daily renewal perspective. So this provides you context for your day. So at the end of your day, look back, or even better, at the beginning of your day, look ahead and go, what is it I want to accomplish? That's what was in the previous book we looked at, The Power of Focus. That was what they called the blueprint. So writing out the things that you need to accomplish through the day, not necessarily on a rigid time zone. That's the thing that gets us in trouble, is when we're going to say, at 8 o'clock I'm going to do this, at 9 o'clock I'm going to do this, 10 o'clock I'm going to do this. Because then what happens is, if one of these things takes more time or goes a little haywire, or some emergency comes into play, it throws off the entire day. Instead, you take that principle of taking the bucket, and first you drop in the important things, the big rocks, and then you have space within the bucket to fill in the little things that come up. And that's what they're talking about with the daily perspective. So what you do here is you look at what they call the whole parts whole. So you look at the whole big picture, you look at the individual parts that you have, and then you trying to decide how those best go together. And you establish this into a full weekly perspective. And one of the best ways to do this is to combine some of your goals together. So for example, I do a lot of goal combining. So when I read these books, and pretty much when I read about any book, I actually take a walk when I read. So I walk and read at the same time. And I hear a lot of people like, yeah, I couldn't possibly do that. No, give it a try. It's not something that you just pick up one day and you do. It's like, I don't play the trumpet. Well, you could if you took some lessons and slowly get yourself a little bit of practice. So try it out. I'll walk in parks like this. Sometimes I'll walk on streets and roads and things, although, I wouldn't do it in heavy traffic or anything like that. This world's kind of creepy. But in that perspective, what I like to do is when I walk, I read, and that combines that reading element that we should all have in our life to read and to learn and to grow ourselves with exercise to help ourselves along. And, you know, I can get along like, I mean, I don't know what the time is because my phone is over here recording me right now. but I probably would guess that I spent 30 to 45 minutes today reading this prior to recording this video. So I've already walked for 45 minutes and spent 45 minutes reading at the same time. And that way you can double over the things that you need to do, and so that you are not getting too busy or too rushed to accomplish all of the individual goals. Another way I'll do that is I'll work on scripture memory while I run. So I just run, and rather than running with headphones and just listening to music, which is okay, but it's really fruitless, I'll run so I get some good physical exercise in running, but while I do so, I go through all of the list of verses that I'm working on memorizing, and so it gives me that extra practice. And so combining your goals together, the example they use is the personal goal of getting some exercise with a parental goal of spending time with your son. Well, go do something physical activity with your son, and that'll take care of the physical activity and the spending time with your family. And so that is some of those things that you need to look at doing. And so what they're talking about with this whole parts whole is that you create synergy among your goals by combining those goals together. And then of course you remove those artificial barriers, like what I had said. A lot of people, like if I say I'll walk and read, or they'll see me walking and reading, like I couldn't do that. No, you just haven't practiced doing that. Okay, synergizing your goals together means overcoming those barriers and questions. And I'm trying to think back now to when was the first time I ever walked and read at the same time. I want to say it was in college, and I think it was probably because I had to walk across campus here and there and figure out little bits of study notes, and so I figured out how to read a small book or read some notes while I was walking across campus, which could take 10 or 15 minutes. Well, 10 or 15 more minutes of looking over your notes while you're walking is actually a very good way to build that up. And so figuring out how to put your goals together to figure those things out is a critical thing to figuring out how to put this in perspective. And then they talk about this content in context. And what this means is that you are taking the entire context of your week, and you are looking at the various individual goals that you have for the week and for the month and for the year, and figuring out where can you work on what. So for example, as I'm working on a few different books and I encountered this other book, my entire purpose was to have one book done by now, and it's not quite there. I'd say it's 95% complete. And then I'm going to work on a 1-year deadline with another person on one solid project. I'm pleased that we're still moving along quite well, but then I got this idea to write this other book in the middle of it all, which I actually pushed out the draft in 6 weeks. By figuring out where and what I wanted to do and how I best wanted to organize everything, it enabled me to move in the perspectives and the contents and the directions that I needed to move in. And that is what we're talking about with content in context. And so this is where they talk about creating time zones. So a time zone is when you block off certain times for certain projects. So for example, I'm going to be doing once again another Financial Peace University as a coordinator for that, to help people get off of their debt and get their money in order. And so as I do that, I know that we have the class at a certain period of time, but I'm going to have to find another probably half an hour to an hour block of time to review the materials prior to the classes, so that I can go in there prepared and ready to have some discussions. And that is figuring out those time zones. So for me right now, I operate with some fairly interesting time zones where I do not go into my office to work until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So from 2 o'clock in the afternoon till about 6 o'clock in the afternoon is a solid 4-hour block of work time. And then I take a couple hours off, and that couple hours I write for an hour. So I'll write for an hour, and then I'll record a video, and then I will do dinner, and then I will come back after all of that, and I'll come back probably about 10 o'clock and work from about 10 o'clock to about 2 o'clock for another 4-hour period of block focused time. But by having that several hour block in between my 2 rigorous blocks of time, I can get 8 hours a day in, and I'm perfectly relaxed every single day, because I don't have this long, solid block of time. And then I have my mornings from whenever I wake up without a stupid alarm clock until 2 o'clock to walk, to read, to study, to do anything else that I want to do that's not going to take up all this extra time. So those time zones are times where if somebody wants to get a lunch meeting, that's a perfect time. I can schedule it in there. And that's where I'm going to pick the time, and that's where I'll plan out Bible studies or whatever else I need to do as well. And so figuring those times out in your life is critically important. Otherwise, you look up and you realize that you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off. And so setting aside the proper preparation time through those time zones is a critical aspect to determining this whole weekly focus. And when you figure all this out, you really do get a boost in your quality of life because you're not feeling as rushed, you're not running in so many different directions. Even right now, I feel really rushed, and I'm actually going to give up my morning study time because it's already coming up on 2 o'clock. And I have not gotten much study time in, but there were some other things I needed to do this morning that were other errands. But the reality is I'll still make it back to the office around 2. I'll still get several hours of work in this afternoon. I'll still be able to stop and take a break, do some videos and some other things like that. And then I'll be able to get back to it and wrap up the day with some more solid work. And so once you get this all figured out, the weekly perspective is a very nice way to balance your week. So it basically starts by either Sunday night or very early on Monday, you plan out all the things you need to do through that week. Basically, that's putting those big rocks into the bucket. And then you can figure out where to fit all of the little things. That way, when urgency comes up, it's a fairly simple thing to just recalibrate some things. So hopefully that's been helpful for you. If you'd like to help support the channel, check out switchtolinux.com/support to learn about the most recent ways. There should be links to Patreon and to Amazon down in the links below. So thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.